Hello there. Today I would like to read another excerpt from the account of Saukamappee recorded in the narrative of David Thompson. This is the second video I've done on this subject. If you haven't seen the first, I recommend you watch it before continuing with this one. I grew to be a man, became a skillful and fortunate hunter, and my relations procured me a wife. She was young and handsome, and we were fond of each other. We had passed a winter together when messengers came from our allies to claim assistance. By this time the affairs of both parties had changed. We had more guns and iron-headed arrows than before. But our enemies, the Snake Indians, and their allies had mistutim, big dogs, that is, horses on which they rode, swift as the deer, on which they dashed at the Piegans, and with their stone clubs knocked them on the head, and they had thus lost several of their best men. This news we did not well comprehend, and it alarmed us, for we had no idea of horses, and could make out not what they were. Only 3 of us went, and I should not have gone had not my wife's relations frequently intimated that her father's medicine bag would be greatly honored by the scalp of a Snake Indian. When we came to our allies, the great war tent was made, with speeches, feasting, and dances as before. And when the war chief had viewed us all, it was found that between us and the Stone Indians we had 10 guns, and each of us had about 30 balls, and powder for the war. And we were considered the strength of the battle. After a few days' march, our scouts brought us word that the enemy was near, in a large war party, but had no horses with them, for at that time they had very few of them. When we came to meet each other, as usual, each displayed their numbers, weapons, and shields, in which they were greatly superior to us, except our guns, which were not shown, but kept in their leathern cases, and if we had shown them, they would likely have been taken for long clubs. For a long time they held us in suspense. A tall war chief was forming a strong party to make an attack on our center, and the others to enter into combat with those opposite to them. We had prepared for the battle the best we could. Those of us who had guns stood in the front line, and each of us had 2 balls in his mouth and a load of powder in his left hand to reload. We noticed that they had a great many short stone clubs for close combat, which is a dangerous weapon, and had they made a bold attack on us, we must have been defeated, as they were more numerous and better armed than we were, for we could have fired our guns no more than twice, and were at a loss as to what to do on the wide plain, and each chief encouraged his men to stand firm. Our eyes were all on the tall chief and his motions, which appeared to be contrary to the advice of several old chiefs. All this time we were about the strong flight of an arrow from each other. At length the tall chief retired, and they formed their usual long line by placing their shields on the ground to touch each other, the shield having the breadth of full 3 feet or more. We sat down opposite to them, and most of us waited for the night to make a hasty retreat. The war chief was close to us, anxious to see the effect of our guns, but the lines were too far asunder for us to make a sure shot, and we requested him to close the line to about 60 yards, which was gradually done, and lying flat on the ground behind the shields, we watched our opportunity. When they drew their bows to shoot at us, their bodies were then exposed, and each of us, as opportunity afforded, fired with deadly aim, and either killed or severely wounded every one we aimed at. The war chief was highly pleased, and the Snake Indians, finding so many killed and wounded, kept themselves behind their shields. The war chief then desired we would spread ourselves by 2 throughout the line, which we did, and our shots caused consternation and dismay among their whole line. The battle had begun about noon, and the sun was not yet half down, when we perceived some of them had crawled away from their shields and were taking to flight. The war chief, seeing this, went along the line and spoke to every chief to keep his men ready for a charge of the whole line of the enemy, of which he would give the signal. This was done by himself stepping in front with his spear and calling on them to follow him as he rushed on their line. And in an instant the whole of us followed him. The greater part of the enemy took flight, but some fought bravely, and we lost more than 10 killed and many wounded. Part of us pursued and killed a few, but the chase soon had to be given over. We counted around 50 of our enemies killed. The terror of that battle, and of our guns, has prevented any more general battles, and all our wars have since been carried out by ambuscade and by surprise of small camps.